Hi, everybody. I just wanted to go live to talk about some things that are or have been going on with me, and some things that are going on for the collective, for everybody. So I like to just talk about some things. So I'm going to talk about an event that I'm doing with Bad Pastor on Sunday. We've been doing this event called the Balsam, I would say now about half a year now, 6 months. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the balsam. I also want to talk about the eclipses coming up starting on the 14th and then carrying through also to the 28th. And I want to talk about the beginners class that I have starting October 22nd. So that's also on the docket. And Astrostar. Astrostar is an exciting new platform that I'm an advisor for. I've been one of their key advisors, board advisors, in the creation of this app. You can find it on the Apple Store and also the Google Store. So do check that out. And I also will be appearing next week with my boy Gimel Resh, with CV Henriette. It's going to be Art of the Zodiac. So art _the_Zodiac. So I'm going to be appearing with my boy Gimel Resh. Now, if you don't know who Gimel Resh is, also Gabriel Rosas, he is perhaps one of the most knowledgeable people with astrology that I know. So he is someone you definitely want to check out and pepper with questions. I believe he is on Instagram, but I know him from Twitter. And I'm sure he's appearing on other platforms. And then the big thing I want to talk about is why I haven't talked much about astrology on Instagram or other places. You know, you may see photos of me partying or other things, but I haven't talked much in public about astrology. And I am going to share. I'm going to be like an open Scorpio, right? And talk about why I haven't talked as much about astrology in public. So let me get to it. So the Balsam is an event that I started with Bad Pastor, also known as Lindsay Turner. They are a former pastor, still a minister in many ways. And what we do is we bring together people in the Santa Fe, northern New Mexico community for ritual work just at the balsamic phase of the moon. And so we're meeting this Sunday at the Unitarian Universalist Church here in Santa Fe. So if you're in northern New Mexico, please come. It is a live in-person event. Unfortunately, we're not doing it remotely. So if you're not in the area, you're like, why are you talking about it? Then it's because, you know, we're doing it for the sake of community. And there's some things that can only be done in person. Like we ask people to bring a ritual object that they can take back home to put on the altar, and we share our intentions for the new moon. Because the balsamic phase of the moon, I think, is an underappreciated phase of the moon. Everyone talks about the new moon, the new moon. The balsamic is where we're supplicating our prayers, intentions to the divine, or whatever you greet as divine, for what we want to see manifest. And I'm going to talk about the cycles of manifestation as we go on, and I'll explain that a little later. But the cycle of manifestation actually begins really just before the new moon, not just at the new moon. So one of the reasons why we have this event is to kind of harness the energy of this coming powerful moon and then be able to work on developing it and manifesting it. Like I said, we've been doing it for about 6 months. It's been really tremendous in terms of spiritual work. And I'm very proud of the work that Lindsay and I are doing in the community that we're fostering here in Santa Fe. So I do want to just, invite you, either if you're ever visiting in Santa Fe. And Santa Fe is a tremendous place to visit. I mean, I don't know if many of you know me from Brooklyn. Some of you know me, from way back from Buffalo. But yeah, this is kind of more of what we're doing. I have been thinking about you, Evie. So let's talk. It's funny. I'm just like looking through now. Um, yeah, I definitely want to talk with you in terms of not just the reading, just to see how you're doing. So yeah. So yeah, I'm inviting you for that. Let me talk now about the eclipses. I'm not going to do my usual thing right now, which my friend, um, my friend has pointed out to me that I seem to kind of come only on Instagram to talk about eclipses and warn y'all not to do like work on the actual eclipse. I've already just said it. That's not why I'm here. To give you some different guidance, and this is kind of going toward what I'm going to be talking about a little later about the kind of new horoscopes and things and why I haven't been talking as much about astrology in public as much. So the thing to understand about eclipses, the eclipse that's coming up on October 14th is at 21 degrees Libra. And if you have planets near that degree and planets or points in the sign of Aries, Capricorn, or Cancer, you are likely affected by this coming eclipse. Do not panic. A lot of people think like, oh, it's going to fuck me up. It's going to do this. The better way to think about eclipses are like shots of espresso where they kind of ignite, offer energy in the body, and it usually takes 1 to 3 months to manifest within your life. Again, the question that always comes up related to astrology is whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I try to avoid such terminology because some things that you think bad in the moment turn out to be tremendously good. And some things that you think to be good could become bad. So it's better to think, what really fosters my growth as a being, as a person? What really kind of opens me up related to my spiritual life? These are the things that I think become important related to your development, rather than thinking like, is this going to fuck me up? Or is this going to really accelerate some other aspects of my life? And that's how I usually try to talk about eclipses. Now, the thing to know, like if you wanted to get, and I don't see many astrologers talking about this, if you really wanted to get a heads up on eclipses and you've kind of lived relatively long enough or you've been conscious for a long time, and I say conscious, I don't mean conscious in the way like you're awake politically. I mean conscious in the sense that you've been alive and paying attention. This eclipse that's coming up on October 14th is at the exact same degree on the exact same day as 19 years ago. So if you want to get some sense of what is happening or what can happen related to this eclipse, think back to October 14th, roughly the day, the months following October 14th, 2004. That was 19 years ago. It's at the same degree, and it's going to ignite some of the same planets in your natal chart. So this becomes a way that you can start thinking about eclipses reflectively, rather than like, what's going to happen to me? Well, some measure of it in some permutation has already happened. So I think it becomes important to start reflecting more on what has happened, what things ignite. Let me lead by example. So one of the things that I know that happened for me in 2004, roughly a month afterwards, is that I got a certification in astrology from the National Council for Geocosmic Research, and I went to their penultimate level, level 3. So I was getting ready for a pretty grueling exam and doing the research and everything else to kind of go toward that level in 2004. So again, this is a moment where I'm diving deeper into a whole different level of my astrology. And for those who don't know me, I actually have been studying astrology for over 31 years. And I started studying astrology as a skeptic. I thought astrology was the biggest crock of shit I've ever heard in my life. I hated astrology. And so I went from skeptic to astrologer and studying astrology and really doing the work and learning more about astrology. So this is kind of more my story, but 2004 was the turning point where I had decided that I was going to be more involved in doing astrological work. So that's what happened for me 19 years ago. What I'm asking of you, for those who have lived longer than 19 years of life, is to really start to analyze, reflect on what has happened for you in 19 years ago. And I don't mean to the day. A lot of people think that astrology works on a dime, like on the actual day of something. And this is not really true. The thing that you have to keep in mind about astrology is that just because, like, when Mercury goes, or Mercury's retrograde, people think, okay, Mercury's direct, it's over. It's not over. Mercury is still doing the work related to whatever you didn't deal with during the retrograde. Now, people have also introduced this idea of the shadow. The shadow is only about 30 years old or whatever in astrology, but we won't talk about that right now. But, people talk about the shadow, but it's still something that's still in effect as you move forward in terms of understanding a particular transit or moment of astrology. So I want you to keep that in mind for eclipses. I will just say this again for my friend Eliza Hartwood here on Instagram, is that, with eclipses, the one coming up on the 14th, that day is not the best day of doing intentions or charging your crystals. And I mean literally that day, maybe the day after, some hours after the eclipse. And you might ask me, well, what's the best thing to do in preparation for the eclipse or at the day of the eclipse? I would say and recommend getting in water, chilling. It's a good day to sleep. I mean, it is happening on, I believe, a Saturday. So it's a good day to rest, to reflect. You're absorbing very powerful energy. And sometimes that energy can be too much just to kind of be able to absorb at any one particular point. So it's usually recommended not a time to be too active. You notice, like during a solar eclipse, birds shut the fuck up. So why are you still going off? Right? Observe nature. So I think one of the best lessons is to really go with nature and see how do other creatures react to natural phenomenon rather than acting like a nut. A lot of people think that human beings should just be like active during particular transits, and sometimes it's best to slow down. So that's my word on eclipses. The other thing I wanted to let people know is that I'm starting another round of my beginners class. It's called Nitty Gritty 1. You can find that in my tap link in my bio. And Nitty Gritty 1 is the beginner's course. It is available at my page, unlockastrology.com. And when I say beginner's course, let me talk a little bit about my teaching style and my work as a teacher of astrology. Since I came to astrology as a skeptic, I had to understand two things with astrology. How does it work and why does it work? So I'm never satisfied with just the answer like, well, it works. I need to know more about the history. I need to know more about how it works, or what are the philosophies and the mechanics and ideas behind something working, so I can explain those things to other people. So my students will tell you, I am not looking to force my ideas on you or say, look, well, just do what I say. I will explain to you both why I say what I say and make room also for your disagreement and your experience, because I think this is part of the work that is there. I'm not there to say, like, this is the way it must be done. It's more so to understand, here's how some ways that we've looked at things historically that work, how they work, and the understanding behind them. So one of the things I emphasize related to astrology and teaching astrology is to know your why. What I mean by knowing your why, if I ask you, well, why do you use the Placidus house system? And you say to me, well, my teacher used it. I don't think that's a reason. That's just you following along what your teacher's done. Why do you use it? Now, here's the thing. If you say to me, I use it because I had tea with Jesus on Tuesday and Jesus told me to use the Placidus house system, and that's what I'm using. Well, that's your experience. And I never argue with people about their experiences, and that's your why. Okay. So at least you have a why. So I believe in people forming their own why for why they do something related to astrology. What you will see on TikTok, what you'll see here on Instagram, a lot of people talking about things they don't really know anything about. I saw someone sent me a video on TikTok about a guy talking about the constellation of Ophiuchus and saying that there were 13 signs of the zodiac that the Babylonians used, and then they got rid of it. The fuck they didn't. That never happened. No one has ever included Ophiuchus, the 13th sign, as part of their astrology. You show me, and I'm the kind of asshole that asks questions like this, show me the book where you got that information. Show me the scholar who cited that. They won't, because that's my work. That's what I do. I look up what people say. It's not just enough because you just heard it online, like, well, it must be true that maybe this person knows what he's talking about. There are a lot of people talking about things, they don't know what they're talking about. And again, I never stopped with like, well, you should trust me. I've been studying it for 31 years. I'm wearing glasses. I have spiritual homeboy on my shirt. You know, I'm a good guy. No, I'll show you my sources. I'll show you also where I've learned it, and I will give you my reasoning. So either you can reject it, which I think is fair, or you can accept it. So that's pretty much how I teach and how I talk through things. I do see a few of my students who are here. I see the Starry-Eyed Sage is here. Hello, Starry-Eyed Sage. So I want to encourage you to recognize that it's more about you learning your own facts based on what you can find and see, rather than it's like, well, just trust me. So that's one other thing I wanted to talk about. If you want to sign up for my classes, I also want to talk about a new exciting app. Like I've been a key advisor called Astrostar Live. So I'm going to be doing a series of lives on Astrostar this month. One with Michael Bartlett, another one with Tara All, and I think I'm doing one with Taylor Schuler. So yeah, it's an app dedicated to astrology with real astrologers talking to you live. It's like Instagram matched with another kind of app, maybe like CoStar, that really introduces you to astrologers talking about astrology. So I would encourage you to download it. It is growing. We're looking to create more of a community related to astrology. So people talking about various perspectives on astrology. So it's called astrostar.live. Another thing that I'll be doing on here next Tuesday, is that right? The 10th. I believe that's right. On Tuesday the 10th. I'll be joining Art of the Zodiac, that's CV Henriette, to talk with my boy Gimel Resh. As I mentioned earlier, Gimel Resh is perhaps one of the most knowledgeable people about astrology that I know besides Rob Hand. He's brilliant in so many different ways, and so we're going to be talking about astrology, and then you can just ask us, questions, and we're going to have fun. Now, the last thing before I wrap up this live, and I want to thank everyone for joining me. What's up, King Simon? I just see you blasting through, man. You are amazing. King Simon is a numerologist that I've known, I want to say good 15 years since I was in Brooklyn. A phenomenal numerologist, has a book out doing phenomenal work. And you definitely want to, if you're into numerology, you want to check out his work, as well as our teacher, Lloyd Strayhorn. I mean, I haven't officially studied with Lloyd, but I studied with his book and his incredible material. So you want to check out King Simon in his work. So yes, assalamu alaikum. And and I see Being Bernstein is on here. What's going on, Scorpio brother? It's been a long time. I know I owe you a call. Don't cuss me out, but we'll connect. I see you doing great things with tarot. So if you can't get the reading you want, right, do it your damn self. That's the Scorpio spirit. So good to see you. So I want to talk briefly about why I've been silent, why I haven't talked much about astrology. And I'm going to, bare my soul a little bit. I also see the person who gave me this shirt on here, Spiritual Homegirl. So thank you. As you can see, Spiritual Homeboy. I always get compliments when I wear this shirt. So why was I silent? So I'm going to bear a little bit about my soul. So I moved out here to Santa Fe the same day I divorced my wife. She saw it coming. She's an astrologer, so don't feel like she was broadsided. Like it wasn't like, oh, baby, I'm going to Santa Fe now. Bye. We're divorced. It was a lot more than that. And what I didn't anticipate was the effect that divorce would have on me. It was a mutual divorce. It wasn't, like I said, blindsided from either one of us. We are still very good friends and communicate regularly. But it had this effect on me, which I felt a few things. One, it was connecting to a new city, a new part of the country for me. And so I just didn't realize how burned out I was. And I was still going strong. I was on different podcasts, doing work with Karen Hunter, and I still have a lot of those videos on YouTube. I was seeing clients at that time about 4 days a week. I was appearing on, speaking engagements virtually, and then came to start doing lives, and I was just feeling a bit burned out. The other thing that happened for me is that I saw that we astrologers were talking a lot about the future and mentioning that this new moon, we became like the CNN of the astrological world, and every little thing became something for us to talk about. We would talk about new moons. I remember people saying like, this Mercury retrograde will be unlike any other Mercury retrograde you have ever seen in your life. And we just became so sensationalized, and we have, in my opinion, become so sensationalized. And I felt that we astrologers, and I'm including myself in this, have gotten so much into the business of telling people what to do and what to expect that we're not paying attention to things that have happened, that happen in cycles. Astrology works generally on the level of cycles. So as I talked about the eclipses, and talked about the eclipse on October 14th that happened 19 years ago, we don't talk about that. So past performance in astrology is a measure of how we talk about future results. So, but we don't do the work related to past performance or reflecting on past performance. It becomes like, oh, well, watch out for this coming solar eclipse or this lunar eclipse, and this lunar eclipse is going to be blah, 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 and it's going to be devastating. And a lot of it is, appealing to the sense of doom. Craig, what's going on, frat? And I see Wade is here. Wade, both Wade in real life and Wade Caves, hello. But I think we astrologers talk so much about the future that we don't give any opportunity to reflect on the past. And so I stopped doing my horoscopes, talking so much about the astrology of the moment. One, because it's really very ephemeral content. And I felt like we astrologers are doing a lot of heavy lifting for people in terms of like, this is what you should expect, without people doing that lifting related to themselves. And when I say themselves, I mean reflecting on what has been your experience of transits and these particular things happening. And they don't happen, a lot of times we give the impression with astrology that they kind of happen in the blue. People say like, Mercury's retrograde again? Motherfucker, the planet retrogrades 3 to 4 times a year. So you can see it coming. And not only that, it's happened before. It's happened in particular signs. It's happened at particular degrees. For instance, the Venus, I was talking with my buddy Nick Dagan Best about the Venus retrograde in Leo. this is a similar Venus retrograde as it happened 8 years ago. Have you reflected on what happened 8 years ago related to the Venus retrograde that we experienced this summer? You will find parallels. And that becomes the power and gift of astrology, is to be able to reflect on these patterns, these cycles, so that you can start to piece your life together in more of a cogent, say, coherent fashion, not just based on what an astrologer says, but how you experience life. So I'd like to introduce you to the idea of a kind of horoscope I'm going to start to do, talking live, maybe even doing some writing, getting back to writing. And I'm calling these horoscopes nictinastic horoscopes. I know it sounds nasty, right? It does have the word nasty in it, but nictinastic. And it's after a quote from Hegel, which I'm going to paraphrase, and essentially says that the owl of Minerva flies chiefly at dusk. And the owl of Minerva, her actual name was Nictemine. So Nictemine was the owl that flies at dusk. And what Hegel meant by that is that we understand things retroactively from like nighttime to day. We understand things better in reflection. We understand things better as we consider them. And consider is, in its etymology, an astrological term. It comes from considere, which means to think with one's stars. So what I'm going to start asking more of people is to reflect on what has happened before and their experience of it, where there's a little more work involved for the listener, the viewer, the reader. That's not so much about like, okay, well, today when we have the moon in such and such or in Leo, or as we're going toward a lunar return for you or whatever, is to kind of think more about, okay, here's what's suggested about this particular lunation or this particular transit. Here's what typically can be the experience of it. What's your experience of it? And when I say nictinastic, it's looking at the idea of reflectively going back on these particular cycles as to give you some measure of past performance to think about future indicators or what might happen in the present day. And nictinastic, I'll spell it out for you because you can look it up. And you might say, where's that word? Did you make up that word? I did not make up that word. Here's nictinastic, although it's backwards, right? So you're going to have to make sure, that you can transpose it in your own head. It actually relates to flowers that close up at night. So there are flowers that open up and bloom during the day, and then there are those that seal themselves at night. So nictinastic is referring to the circadian rhythm of particular creatures, and specifically flowers that close up at night. So that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about, nictinastic, influenced by Athena's owl. You might have noticed, I'm a typical Scorpio. I do some foreshadowing. On one of my stories, I showed an owl flying silently. I'm going to also show you a little later a picture of an owl. That was all kind of foreshadowing Nictemine, using Minerva's owl. Athena also is Minerva, related to the wisdom that we gain from reflection. Because what becomes a point of just living astrology from day to day, reading horoscopes, and not reflecting on, well, what was your experience? How did it feel for you? Was that even true? Do you hold your astrologers accountable? And when I ask my clients to hold me accountable, when they said such and such to you, did it come true? Did it happen? Does it resonate for you? And just because there are people on here who kind of like, what you said didn't make sense to me and it didn't work. Okay, that's information, not just for the astrologer, but for a person who's, experiencing the astrology. That provides opportunity for us to refine, to grow, to develop, but kind of going more with this idea like, I said it, this is what's going to happen. Well, I think that's where astrologers, at this point, I would say astrologers are overreaching. And, I'm no longer skeptical of astrology, but including myself, I'm skeptical of astrologers. And so that's why I was silent in terms of reformulating my mind, reformulating my thought. I am not afraid to challenge any of my own preoccupations and presuppositions. And I damn sure am not afraid to do that for anyone else, and I don't think you should be either. So that's what you can expect from me. I mean, I always like what I have to say, but I'm always going to be true, especially to myself and what I feel and what I know. And I do hope you continue tuning in. I want to say hello to all the people who also have joined that I've missed. Fanam9, thank you. I appreciate that. And Maz, assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh. Also, great to see you. There's some names on here I'm sure I know in real life, but don't know you by your Insta name. Janice Steele McMillan, what's going on? Annie Framand, hello, bonjour, or I should say, hola, because you're also where you are. But I want to thank everyone for, joining me and listening. And yes, thank you. I'm glad you appreciate my honesty. I am often honest, sometimes to a fault. But working on being able to have that in balance. Well, I'm going to have to get ready to go, but I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and peace and blessings to you. And I will be tuning in again. Yeah, and thank you. Yeah, pause. I think that's a good thing. One last thing I will say. Oh, yeah, King, let's talk. King Simon, let's talk about when you want me on. One last thing I'll say, especially to my younger astrologers, those who are just getting into astrology, I still would recommend having time to reflect, pause, and feeling like you got to go all the time is a good way toward burnout. One particular student of mine, Vera Rocks, who's on here, was talking about burnout yesterday, and I thought that was like a sign. I was like, oh yeah, I could relate. I was definitely experiencing burnout some time back, and now I'm on the come up and I'm feeling more like myself. So it's good to have some space and to experience space. So keep that in mind. Juan, I'm glad this resonated for you, and I just want to say thank you to everybody. Tune in another time, and I'll say, since it's Friday, assalamu alaikum.